So nice to have Canvas back, right? My kids were like, even Amazon was affected. Our deliveries are gonna be late. So sorry. My daughter ripped her like sheets, and so we ordered new ones. And she was like, "They're not coming now. Like they'll be here tomorrow. It's one only a day. Hold on." All right, good morning. Everyone hanging in there? Halloween's coming so soon. I'm so ready for Halloween. I bought all my candy yesterday, so I'm ready. Right now, I'm officially ready. Like I have all of it. I have way too much candy. Everybody had their requests, so I have like enough for a lot of trick-or-treaters. I hope we get them this year. We'll see. But I wrote a couple of reminders up there. Canvas is working, as I was just saying. So what I'll do when we're finished with this is we can go over that a little bit. I'll show you, I uploaded 2 sample papers. I was able to get permission from 2 people, so I can show you what those look like and then kind of remind you about the exam and stuff. So we'll talk about that at the end when everybody here, bless you. So we'll jump back into, bless you, where we were at, and again, only kind of one big disorder in this chapter, but which we've been talking about, and then we'll talk about the other one that's right here. But we talked a lot last time about the different categories of drugs, those 3 different categories, and then substance use disorder. And remember, you specify the substance, right? So substance use disorder, cocaine or caffeine or whatever it might be. But with that one, we're looking at that long-term pattern of problems. What were some of the symptoms, like just as a quick reminder? Somebody give me like one of the symptoms of having that disorder. Yeah. Yeah, tolerance, right? You need more and more to get the same effect. What's another one? Another symptom? Withdrawal, right? Right. You feel awful when you don't have it. Anything else? What are some other ones that you need to have? You need to have 2 or more over a year. And we wrote some up on the board. Can someone give me another one? Yeah. Yeah, you're craving it. Craving is a big part of this, right? And there's nothing wrong with craving or wanting something, but then it causes all these issues. What's another one? Anyone have another one that you wrote down? There's like several more. Any other ones you can think of? Yeah. I know you haven't because I wrote them down, right? But what do you think? Can you think of any other ones? Yeah. Yeah, okay. So you're dependent on it, right? You need it. You need that substance. Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one, right? It makes it where it's hard to do the things you're supposed to do. It puts you in dangerous situations, right? So it's this very like problematic pattern over a long period of time. So substance use disorders are when you have a problem with the substance. Now, this one is really tricky. I want you to remember way back when we first started chapter 4, the disorders, I wrote 2 criteria on the board that are true for every single disorder. And one was that it has to cause significant distress and impairment. The other is it cannot be due to a general medical condition or the use of a substance. Okay, that was the other criteria that is true for every disorder. So when we're talking about depression, can't be due to a general medical condition or the use of a substance. Anxiety can't be due to the use of a substance. So what happens if somebody has anxiety because they've been using a substance, right? That's where this comes into play. And so this one actually ends up being used a lot if we think that there's a substance that someone is using that's causing them problems. So someone has depression because they're drinking too much. Someone has anxiety because they're overusing like a stimulant. But someone develops schizophrenia because they were using hallucinogenic drugs. So if you've ever heard of like drug-induced schizophrenia, that's where this comes into play. So somebody can develop a disorder because of the use of a substance. And because we have that one criteria saying that it can't be the case for all of the disorders, we have to have a disorder where it's substance induced. So let's say that somebody is using like some sort of amphetamine for a long period of time and they develop anxiety as a result of it. Very common, right? When you have a stimulant, it pushes you way, way up. You get really jittery, you're on edge. It could create anxiety. That anxiety wasn't there, but it becomes there because of the substance. It induces it. And it might go away when you stop using the substance, or it could take a little while, or it could be there forever, unfortunately. Bless you. So we have to have this group, and the most common one you hear of is schizophrenia. Like someone develops schizophrenia, they're not in contact with reality. They're seeing things or hearing things because of the use of like a hallucinogenic drug. But it could also be anxiety, bipolar disorder, depression. It could be anything. But the key is that it is caused by exclusively or induced by a substance. Okay. And so that's where all of those other like kind of catch-alls end up right here. Was that it? Oh, I thought you had your any like thoughts or comments on that? My daughter Emma was asking me about this yesterday. She's all like, if somebody starts hallucinating and they develop schizophrenia, my 11-year-old, right? Someone gets schizophrenia because they're using drugs. I'm like, why are you asking me about drugs? She's like, well, we're talking about drugs in school. Yeah, felt a little better after that, right? But she's like, if someone's using drugs and they get schizophrenia, is that a real thing? Like, yes, right. My little like early psychologist, right? It makes me so happy. She's all interested in schizophrenia, right? Like, finds it interesting right now. But that's where this would fall into play. So we kind of have the one main disorder where drugs are causing problems, and then a disorder where it's induced, like some other disorder is induced by the drug. Any thoughts, comments, questions, anything about these two? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, technically, right? It could be pretty much anything, right? Yeah, right. And so it gets so tricky because you have to look at like the whole picture, right? But if somebody starts using a substance and they develop a disorder that wasn't there before, we're going to credit it here, right? But let's say they have a lot of other factors, it might get a little like which came first, like that whole chicken or the egg, right? Like we have to decide.
Like, for example, if it's like a child, let's say they grew up in a really rough environment and they were using substances from a very young age.
Yes.
Or a tricky substance.
Yeah.
Or the abuse that they went through situation.
Right. And sometimes it's hard to know, right? Is somebody using a drug to help them with a disorder, to help them cope with something? Or is the drug causing things to happen? And it's not always obvious. Like sometimes it is, but it can be really blurry and hard to figure out. Yeah. Did you have a thought?
Yeah, I think really listening who smokes marijuana very I heard of like schizophrenia with like harder drugs, I guess you could say, but to see someone go through like schizoaffective disorder and there's this different type of paranoid too. It wasn't like seeing things that or hearing things that weren't there. It was just being in this diluted world and seeing it in different ways. Like once I finally understood it, reality is a little diluted in the actual reality. It was like, wow, I wonder if this is what you thought all this time. Like, I know the person went through like childhood traumas, but normalized it. So to be in that diluted world was like the reality they set themselves in to like escape. Where
and cope, right? Yeah.
So it's like, was it really substance use? Maybe not.
Right.
But it didn't help the situation because it made those paranoid thoughts even like the reality of their world.
Right. So it could exacerbate something that's already there, right? Because if somebody experiences a lot of trauma, especially when they're young, it's not uncommon to have unrealistic or like false thoughts about the world, like delusional kind of thoughts on a spectrum. But then you start using a substance, it could really push that even farther. Yeah.
If you have someone like in your family that has schizophrenia and then you start using some type of drug, can that maybe like make them more prominent to wanting it too?
It could be the trigger that brings it forth. So schizophrenia, which is our one that we'll start with after the test, has a very strong, like what they call diathesis stress like cause. What that means is there could be some kind of like push that creates it to come forward, which is often a substance. So what could happen is you have a genetic biological predisposition, and then you have some kind of environmental trigger that brings it forward. That trigger could be a stressor, or it could be the use of a drug. And so when it runs in a family, you have to be even more careful with the things that you do in your like system, right? Because that could be the thing that like pushes it forward. It definitely could be, or not. And the wild thing is we don't know, right? So you have to have a little bit of extra caution, I would say, if that was the case. All right. So I mentioned this last time, but just to kind of follow through the order here, drugs, when you take multiple drugs, they really interact with each other very unpredictably. So we get what's called a synergistic effect. Synergy can be a really good thing. Like we often talk about synergy as being when two things combine to create more than they could on their own. Like the idea of group work. Group work is supposed to be like a synergy thing. You get a bunch of people together and you can create more than you could by yourself, right? Doesn't always go that way with group work, but that's the idea. But synergy means that two things act on each other to create a different effect. And this happens a lot with drugs. Prescribed ones, also illegal ones, like all of them, drugs can interact with each other really, really intensely and create like very unpredictable effects in your system. So I like had a seizure in May. I've never had seizures my entire life, but I was taking an antibiotic and I had like 2 or 3 medications that I was taking. And it was that they interacted with each other in a really poor way. It caused me to have a seizure, right? I got off of all the medications, knock on something, I haven't had a seizure since. It doesn't run in my family. They were like, I don't know what this is. It was likely that these drugs interacted with each other. That can happen. It's so scary when stuff like that happens. It was horrible. I was in the shower of all the places to be, right? Like it's so embarrassing. But like it was just such a like unpredictable thing. And that can happen with these and it can be fatal, right? And so even those were like prescribed drugs by my doctor, let alone like when people start combining drugs that are illegal and have unpredictable effects, and maybe you don't even know the origins or how they were even made. Like, and we see a lot of tragic endings from that. And the list of this is so much longer. I just picked a few, but a lot of really like big people who have died from combinations of drugs, right? A lot of them prescribed. And it just leads to very unpredictable effects. Some of them on purpose, some of them not on purpose, some we'll never know. But it's often the case that when you combine substances together, they get even more lethal and dangerous. So just something to keep in mind, like even with prescribed stuff, you have to be careful. The more drugs that you add, the more dangerous in a way and unpredictable it can get. Yeah.
Freshman year of high school, I had classmates of mine that passed away
Yeah.
for spring break. And it was due to being prescribed an antidepressant and some anxiety medication together. He ended up going into a use coma and passed away over spring break.
That's so
His
awful.
parents ended up suing and they ended up just literally not even admitting fault or anything.
Yeah.
So it goes to show like there's such a lack of communication that makes it even prescribed medications, or that someone prescribing the medication could be known of the fact that they shouldn't go there.
Right. That's so like awful, two things that are very commonly prescribed, right? And on a way lesser level of, if you've ever heard of serotonin syndrome, right? That's something that happens to a lot of people when they're on antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication. It can be fatal too, right? It can be something that is incredibly dangerous when your serotonin levels are getting boosted by like an antidepressant, and then all of a sudden you take something else with it. It can cause it to go through the roof. You can have a heart attack. Like, I mean, just so many unpredictable things, even from something so common as like an antidepressant, let alone like when we're talking about, LSD and marijuana and all these like harder kind of substances. Any other like thoughts or stories or questions, comments? Yeah.
Just too much.
Yeah. So it could be that you took too much of a like antidepressant, for example. It's a very common symptom that they list when you take antidepressants. It could also be from interacting with another drug, like something as benign as caffeine. There are certain cough medications, right? Really random, like there are a couple of cough medications like Delcium, I think it is, where if you take that with certain SSRIs, it can kill you. Right, and it's not even common knowledge, right? Like a lot of people don't know that, but they end up in the hospital with like almost like heart attack like symptoms because they combine two things like that together. So yeah, it could be that you took too much or you combined it with something else. It could go either way. Yeah.
A question about like taking the psychedelics that, produce a lot of serotonin.
Mm-hmm.
And afterwards, it's said that the withdrawals kind of have you maybe 2 to 3 days without naturally being feel happy or something like that, like
Sure.
something like ecstasy or something like that. I've heard that you don't really, because it floods your system.
Yeah.
So much what you said, you actually just don't produce it. Like
Yeah, there's like a bottoming out that
There's a
happens. Mhm.
that period of time, I think what happened during like that period of time, would that still be attributed to the substance itself?
Probably, right? Like I would assume so.
Through like a process.
Yeah, like it feels like it would be like logically attributed to the effects of that substance, right? Even if it's part of the withdrawal.
If they end up developing another, like for example, like just that's your permanent baseline.
Yeah,
Would you still be with that? Yeah.
it'd be a substance induced, right, like
Yeah.
issue, right? Because it was caused by the substance. But and again, it's not always like perfectly clear, but in that case, it would kind of
Yeah.
seem to be. But yeah, when you take certain drugs that you go so far up, and then there's this bottoming out that happens, it can take a little bit for your body to kind of like level back out. And sometimes people don't level back out after using a substance, which is horrible. Like some people, the wildest thing, every single one of you could take the same drug, and you would all react to it differently. It would take a different amount of time to work its way through your system. Bless you. You would all have different reactions to it. We could all take the same drug, and it's so unpredictable. Our chemistries are just so different. Yeah.
When I can be in COVID days,
The dark days,
Dark.
right? Yeah.
I was on certain mental medications for like long period of time.
Sure.
Like a year. When I had COVID, I couldn't like really take any type of pills just because of the type of COVID that I had. It was nauseating. So
Sure.
for like a month, I was off of everything.
Mhm.
And I will tell you like the brain fog.
Yeah.
The way that I'm just like, I feel now, like I felt so, I don't say numb, but just like rolling through life.
Yeah.
That after kind of detoxing my body from like everything, it really opened my eyes. I get to very a little more, it was, I mean, granted, I'm a little different because of my PTSD, but it was very like eye-opening. Like,
Yeah.
I just felt like a haze had come off of. I worked for the time period that I
Sure.
did, but then it was like, maybe that was just the time where it's like, that's it, you don't need anymore.
Mhm.
Not perfect by any means off of them, but I do try a lot harder, like, I don't wanna go back to that, like,
Yeah.
of like, okay, the medications are no longer with me. And I was just kind of taking them just to take them.
It becomes your normal, right? Like you
Right.
just keep going with
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Now I'm like, I mean, ideal, real life.
Mhm. Yeah, and like in a way, right? Sometimes you get those weird blessings in disguise where you end up having to go off of something, and then you're like, oh, well, once you push through that fog and like all of those things, you might feel very differently off of them. Substances can do that. Yeah, oh yeah.
But, and it was really difficult, but like afterwards, it was like relieving to me.
Sure.
I did that. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely a very I'm glad that time is in the right
In the dark
COVID
days.
times, so the dark days of COVID. So some causes, shocker, it's a combination of everything, right? That's almost always the case, but we look at a bunch of different things. So from a socio-cultural perspective, from like a cultural looking at multiple influences, right? Oftentimes people who grew up in very difficult socioeconomic conditions are more likely to abuse substances, right? Like it just becomes kind of like a strong correlation that we have. It doesn't mean that you're doomed to, but oftentimes people growing up in poverty, high like stress, right, difficult socioeconomic status or conditions might be more vulnerable, right, to developing a substance disorder, just higher correlations there. Freud would say it was dependency. Of course, Freud would say it was dependency, right? Like you are replacing your dependency on like typically your mother, right? Like from a Freudian perspective, with a substance, right? You're trying to fill that need with something else, right? So he would trace that back to problems when you were very, very young. And now you have a dependency need because your needs weren't met when you were little. Now there's like nuggets of truth in there, but of course, always back to the mother with Freud. Behavioral and cognitive stuff, it's a lot of conditioning. Drugs are very rewarding, which makes it hard. You can't sleep, you take something and you fall asleep and get a good night of sleep. That is so positive reinforcement right there, right? I couldn't sleep, I took a drug, I had a great night of sleep and I feel better. Of course, you're going to take that drug again. Like it's just very rewarding to take a substance. You were feeling anxious, you take something and now you feel calm. You've been rewarded, right? And so it's very difficult to break those reward cycles, which is something that we focus a lot on in treatment, right? Like trying to break the conditioning cycles that are related to substances, the thoughts that you have, I need this in order to be okay, right? You become reliant on a substance and then mentally you feel like you need it, having to look at those thoughts, which we'll get to on the next slides. Biologically, there's a lot of reward as well, right? When you take a substance and you get this like dopamine rush, this pleasure from it, can make it really difficult to break that cycle. And there are some people who don't kind of get the natural high that other people get. And so they seek it through substances, right? This substance makes me feel that rush, makes me feel that happiness or that high. And so there's a reward center in the brain that's very like dopamine rich that can be activated when you use certain substances, making them more rewarding, making them more reinforcing. And so if we think it's these different things and we try and like tackle each one of them through treatment, right? So Freud would go back to discover like the underlying condition, like where did the dependency needs start? What needs weren't met when you were little? And let's try and work through those, right? So Freud talked a lot about things like oral fixation, like so maybe you're a smoker because you were orally fixated as a child. So we'd have to go back and work through that oral fixation in order to get rid of your desire to smoke, right? So very much kind of going back and resolving underlying needs and conflicts from when you were little, everything back to when you were very little. From a behavioral standpoint, we would do a lot of like reconditioning. Now, this doesn't work. There are some serious issues with this, but some substances, you can take another drug, which makes them unpleasant, right? Like, so for example, with drinking, if someone's heavily addicted to alcohol, you can take a substance that makes you throw up the second you drink alcohol. So the idea is that you're reconditioning. Instead of alcohol being pleasant, now you associate it with vomiting. Now, what's the obvious solution to that? You want to go drink, so what do? You don't take the medication, right? Like, I want to feel good today, I just won't take it, right? Like, it's so simple to avoid. But what happens is the moment you take that, it makes you vomit, right? So it's trying to find ways. This is kind of like the old thought. This was so popular in like the 80s, and not really a way that we do it anymore. But it used to be like, I'm going to make my kids smoke an entire carton of cigarettes so they throw up and feel sick. Right, some of them looks like, right, like you would never do that now, like never, right? No, but in the 80s, so common and popular. I'm gonna make my child drink so much alcohol that they vomit and they think it's disgusting for the rest of their life. Okay, that was kind of the idea behind aversion therapy. I'm going to flood you with something really negative so that you forever think it's bad. Okay, now that doesn't work a lot of the time, and it would create other issues, but it was popular in the 80s. So the 80s were a very different time. Yeah.
Like, desensitized or normalized.
Yeah.
Toxic childhood, oh, we have a parent. I mean, like, even something that's like the worst parents, single mother could traumatize you, in a sense, because not having a dad around or whatnot, but those little things like that could make it harder for someone to get over the substance use, right? Normalizing the
Yeah.
toxicity.
Oh, there's so many problems with that mentality, but it was like the whole scare tactics like dare and that were like the norm in the 80s. It's
Yeah.
wild, right? Again, you wouldn't do that now. But it was very common, like if you go back, well, I guess that's like 40 years. I was gonna say 20 years, it's way longer than that. 40 years. Math is my strong suit, right? But if you go back 40 years, it was the idea of like, I'll make you sick on this so that you don't want it later. And sometimes that works, right? Like I was sharing with you that I was in that pie eating competition and I threw up and now I never like whipped cream pie. Like that's the idea behind it. If you get sick, you're not going to want it anymore. It's been punished in a way. So maybe to a smaller extent with things like aversion therapy, but not always the most successful way to go. What we like to do a lot of is this one, this behavioral self-control training. It's like journaling with a purpose. Okay, so doing a lot of journaling related to a substance. If you're addicted to, let's say, like marijuana, right? You would keep a journal of when you use it. What are your thoughts before you use it? What are your thoughts after you use it? How does it make you feel when you use it? Who are you using it with? Are there certain days and times and types? Like you're keeping track of all the information so then we can like try to pick apart like what are your triggers? What are the times of day where you're more vulnerable? Are there certain people that are making you more vulnerable? Right? My daughter has RFID, the restrictive food eating intake disorder. We had to do this with her. It was like, what are your thoughts before you try the food? What are your thoughts after the food? Like every little thing, are there triggers? Are there times? Are there foods? Are there whatever? Very common technique across like certain disorders. Yeah.
I've heard people argue that marijuana isn't addictive,
Mhm.
but I'm thinking like they're just talking about in the like micro like neurological level,
Sure.
because it doesn't like release like or deal with like your serotonin or dopamine, right? It just makes you feel a way.
So I would say that it can be very like addictive, right? So in the way that it works, right, on like your THC like receptors are much more commonly like affected by it. Like maybe it's not directly impacting those things, but it definitely does. And the problem is the motivation behind it. So like I mentioned earlier, let's say someone can't sleep and they start taking like using marijuana at night to help them sleep. All of a sudden it becomes addictive because without it you can't sleep, right? Or you're really anxious, you can't go and hang out with your friends unless you like use it. And now you can hang out with your friends. It becomes, so it definitely, any substance can become addictive, but it has been like decriminalized because it's thought to be less addictive than nicotine, for example. But nicotine is allowed and has been allowed for hundreds of years because of its rich like political economic history. So it's complicated. These drugs are complicated, right? But it can definitely be addictive, but maybe not as harmful as originally in with a lot of like stipulations attached to that, right? Yeah.
Anything you put in your body.
Anything.
It
Yeah.
all depends on how you do it. Like,
Right.
is it I always say, like, is it harming you financially, physically,
Sure.
emotionally, or anybody else who sees it as a problem?
Yeah.
Then it becomes a problem. But
Right.
if it's like something that, like any medication, if marijuana was prescribed, then it wouldn't be such a problem. But because it's up the whole politics behind certain stuff, that's why
Right.
it's more of an issue.
Mhm.
But that's like that with any other drug that's, like not everybody likes Ritalin or stimulants of some kind.
Sure.
I believe in it for their kids, but for other kids it works. So, like everybody's brain
Yeah.
works different.
Yeah. And something as mild as like we were talking about, it's funny, I pointed out all the energy drinks and coffee last time and I don't see any today. Oh, one, right? Right. Oh, two. Okay, right. We're building here. Like I'm addicted to my morning like coffee. You only ever see the water because I've had the coffee already, right? But like, and then that's my healthy after, like force myself to drink all the water. Right? But I like have a cup of coffee every day. Something as mild as a cup of coffee, like it could cause so many problems, right? Coffee's not cheap, right? Like one drink from somewhere is like $6 or $7, right? Like $7 or $8, right? We'll say that. They're expensive, right? So that could add up. If you do that every day, add that up. That's a lot of money, right? That you're spending. It could be that, like, what if you don't get it? Then you're cranky. It could cause problems with your friendships, right? It could cause problems all around. It can make you like moody. Like, there are so many things that could be caused by something as mild and accessible as like a cup of coffee, right? And so, yeah, it gets complicated, right? All substances are tricky in that way. But this one would look at what are like the motivating factors, the things going on around it. There are definitely biological treatments. One of the biggest things, if someone's addicted to a substance, you got to get them off of it, right? And that's called detoxing, right? Or detoxification for like the full name, where you would withdraw from a drug. Sometimes you can do this on your own. Sometimes it needs to be medically supervised, right? Depending on the substance. Things like alcohol, if you drink a ridiculous amount of alcohol every day and you quit cold turkey, it could kill you, right? Because your body is so used to that alcohol to function that it could become a problem, right? So getting you off of a substance, maybe even taking something that blocks the effects of it to help you do so. Controversial ideas, sometimes we put someone on a different drug to get them off of a drug, right? So you're addicted to heroin, I'm going to put you on methadone to help you get off of the heroin, right? So you almost become addicted to something else as a way to transition off of it, something that's more legal, less intense. So sometimes we even use other substances to get somebody off of a drug in cases where that might be helpful or it might like kind of gradually get them there. Yeah.
So I like just watched a documentary on like classes and the big thing was talking about methadone.
Yeah.
But they were talking about it more as like it doesn't give you the same high.
It doesn't,
as it,
yeah.
but it just subsides the withdrawal symptoms.
Right.
But you could still get addicted to just the fact that it subsides your withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah, right. So you could become addicted to methadone. It's not as rewarding, right? But not feeling that like craving and the withdrawal is also reinforcing a little bit. So it's a much easier drug to quit than like heroin, for example, because it doesn't have that intense high that comes with it. But you could still struggle to get off of it, right? And you're still giving someone a drug to get off of a drug, right? Like a little bit of like irony in that, but that's a very common practice. Let me prescribe this to you to help you get off of this, right? And that happens a lot. Yeah.
It's kind of like going from something clear to smoking vape. Because
Sure.
they said the vape was supposed to be healthier for you.
Or a patch or a gum. Uh-huh.
More than I've personally seen someone go through heroin withdrawal and then like use extra methadone, but then also seeing how hard it was to quit the methadone. It is kind of hard because it's like obviously you're quitting. Usually a heroin addict quits for a reason, whether it's because of family and kids or because of legal issues.
Sure.
So to get off of that methadone because you're still having that like reward, like you said, it's like I'm legally still getting that benefit of what you do. That's the mentality behind it. Because you can't do heroin anymore. The next option is methadone.
Yeah. Right. And like you were saying, like going from smoking to vaping, going from smoking to using gum or like a patch, right? It's different substance, but it's less to help you ease off of it. It's a common practice, right? It definitely is. Things like AA, NA, right? A bunch of those like self-help kind of groups and organizations, those 12-step programs that people go through where they have sponsors and like people to help along the way. Very common, like some kind of group therapy or like a self-help group like AA or NA and so on. Sometimes being hospitalized, bless you, like being in a hospital setting or like a residential treatment center can be necessary if somebody's having a lot of issues. You need to remove them from their environment. One tricky thing is like when they go back to their environment, like oftentimes it reactivates some of those issues. But treatment centers, residential ones, and then outpatient stuff more like AA, NA, and so on. Prevention efforts, like really big in school, right? Like my kids are constantly coming home with they have the whole week where it's like say no to drugs and they're educating and learning about these things. And it's balanced a little bit more now than it was like in the 80s where it's not as much, not 100% scare tactics. It's like a little bit of like both. But I think it's dangerous to only teach the scary parts of drugs because drugs have a lot of parts that aren't scary too. And what happens is if you only push the negative and somebody uses a substance and it's positive, they're not going to believe anything you have to say after that. Right. And so I think that's one big issue of prevention efforts is trying to balance the like pros and cons of these substances because you want people to believe you, right? And so there's a lot of prevention efforts that are out there as well. And I have, as I said, a case study. It's kind of similar to the one that we did last time, but this is somebody who is addicted to ecstasy and struggling with that. So similar things, you're gonna look at the symptoms that she has in this. What are some possible causes and contributors and some treatments? So I'll give you each one, but if you want to work on it with like a couple of people, you could turn one in, or you could turn in your own. It's up to you. But I'll hand this out if you want to read through it and then find a person or two around you. I feel so low. Can't hear me, I'm so slow still, but I'm not clicking everywhere I go, my kids can hear me coming and then they run. Like, we weren't on our phones, I swear, we heard you coming. I'll get one too. So read through it, and then when you're done, the questions are on the back, and feel free to work on it with another person or two. Okay, so when you're finished reading it, again, feel free to work on it with a couple of people, get a list going for each of the questions. And then we'll talk about it afterward. A few more minutes, so a lot of you like are on the last or second to last, and then we'll talk about this together. Right, so let's talk about her a little bit, and if you're still kind of finishing up your thoughts, that's totally fine. But what are some of the symptoms that she's showing? Somebody give me one. What's one symptom that she's displaying that would indicate she has a problem with ecstasy? Yeah,
She talked about how much like she's drawn to that first experience.
sure.
And like, no matter how much after the fact, she's taken, she can't recreate that first experience. And she, like, her craving is almost wanting to recreate the first experience as opposed to like getting out what she gets from the book.
Okay, so we got craving and then that like, seeking that high.
And also like her environment made it incredibly kind of like accessible and.
Yeah, we'll come back to that, right? When we get to the causes, that's not helping at all. What else do we got? Yeah,
It's like, it's just like, every time, everywhere, becoming the time to me.
yeah, just kind of using it all the time, anytime, anywhere, right? What else? Yeah.
I think the culture shock of and like wanting to fit in. And it did to that because she came from a small town,
Sure.
which is well known and everything, and then went to a big city like New York, where she's trying to like fit in and do what other people are doing, so that people are close up as them, I guess.
Yes, both of those are really good, like for number two, right? The causes and contributors, like the low self-esteem, the new environment. But focus on like just so we don't lose them, the symptoms. Like what are some of the other like diagnostic things? Yeah.
We were seeing how she goes about withdrawal symptoms, just
Yeah.
on the bed with the nightmares and the shakes.
Just at night, right? Like within the day. Yeah. Okay, other stuff. Yeah.
She like disregarded her career, and she
Yeah.
also looked out at people who couldn't take it.
Right. Two big things there, right? So it's interfering, it's causing problems. Yeah.
Also sometimes are like affecting her body, like her skin,
Yeah.
like headaches and stuff.
Yeah, for sure, right? I changed one thing in here. I added 13 months, right? A time frame, right? Again, we had to have at least a year, so like 13 months. I love that they give you a picture of her, like somehow like now you can picture her. They actually had one on the back of her looking really like bad and angry in Italy. Because I was like, that's supposed to be fun, right? We'll give her a hopeful, we'll keep her happy. But anything else that you wrote down for number one? Any other symptoms that you identified? There's one more that I have written down. Yes.
I guess it's what I wrote is the drug-induced psychosis.
Okay.
I mean, I know it's that after the fact, but like, when taking drugs to
Yeah.
have that kind of psychotic meltdown in this thing, because of the drugs are good.
Yeah, I mean, and definitely, like the effects of those drugs are very prevalent for her. Anything else? Anything more? I have like time spent in pursuit of the goal, right? Like the time that she uses it and pursues it and like all of those things, right? Along with the withdrawals and the giving things up, all the things that you mentioned, very clearly has a problem with ecstasy, right? And you mentioned two really good things for number two, but what are some other causes and contributors? Yeah.
Like, it was really easy for her to obtain because her boyfriend sold it. And she's
Yeah.
like, "You really have to pay for me."
Right. Too easy, right? You don't have to pay for it. You can access it really easily. Like, those things are definitely not helping her at all. What else might be some causes, contributors? There's a couple of little things in there that might kind of point us there. Yeah.
Just talked about how her and friends all have similar things have and
Yeah.
negative is the ecstasy, negative is the.
Mhm.
All that's this positive.
Yeah, right. So a lot of like positive reinforcement and very related to that. I don't know if you saw there's that like we were all broken in some way, right? That like underlying issue, and then it's reinforcing and helping to make it better. Yeah.
On top of that, it was also like everyone's career she was pursuing.
Yeah.
To be on drugs, she wanted to fit in.
Yeah. Huge motivator, right? I want to be like with everybody. I want to fit in. I want to be like normal and part of things, right? That is a huge thing that's going to like contribute. And then the rush of the drug, the reward of using it, which some of you had mentioned, and that peer pressure, the environment is huge. And this happens to a lot of people when they go off to college somewhere and all of a sudden they have like the freedom and they're in a new environment and people are using substances. It's like that, I want to fit in, it's new, right? And kind of overwhelming a little bit. That like it's a very like kind of common situation to happen. Yeah. Sure. To being sheltered a little bit. What about some other thoughts for number three? Things that she did or options for treatment? What are some of the things that we could do to help her? Yeah. Yeah. Great, right? So try to help maybe some of those underlying like chemistry things that might be influencing. What else either did she do or could we do? Like what did you write down? Yeah. Yeah, right. Make it unpleasant for her in some way. It feels mean, but again, with a good intention behind it, yeah.
She said she went to.
Yeah. Yeah, so being like, you know, in like an inpatient somewhere and trying to like detox from it, all the important things, anything else you either have in here or want to add that might help?
I just,
Yeah.
like, when we were talking about how, like, writing it down.
Mhm.
Is that kind of like why I like that, like,
Yeah, right, it's very along those lines, right, so that like, that technique of, yeah, wise man or, dear man, sometimes it's called, which is an acronym for cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. It's very along those like behavioral self-control training, CBT kind of stuff, right? And I think for her, I mean, it'd be pretty obvious what the triggers and connections and environmental things are if she were to do them, right? Like there's a lot of them. And so it's very much along those lines of like, here's my trigger, here are the thoughts and emotions and things behind it. Very cognitive behavioral in very along those dear man kind of lines. So, yeah.
I noted that she kind of like towards the end, she talks about a lot about like doing soul searching and I felt like that was a really important part because I feel like a lot of people that aren't even that big process, they don't take the time to kind of that and that they couldn't live in. And it felt like she, like, to go from halfway through this paper to where she said, I can't even imagine a world without drugs.
Yeah.
To towards the end of the paper, which is kind of when you taking the time to familiarize yourself with the world that she felt like she couldn't operate in. And
Yeah.
I think that the feeling of not being able to operate in this world and feeling so overwhelmed, I think also maybe triggered.
Yeah, very like humanistic existential perspective there, but I like that. Like what gives you meaning, you know, and kind of looking for some soul searching might help her a little bit of like finding that meaning and what's driving her to help her with maybe some of the motivating stuff there. And again, this is not like an abnormal example. It's a pretty like I picked this one because it happens a lot this way. Like obviously this is a kind of a huge shift in environment, but even something more subtle from like living at home to going off to college. I mean, they're completely different environments and triggers. I'll collect this from you in just a moment if you want to make sure that your first and last name is on there. I want to go over those things really quickly and then I'll collect that and we'll call it a day. So two things, right? So the paper and 7 of you have already turned it in, right? But you have until tonight at 11:59 p.m. Remember with these, you can turn them in late. Like, so if you miss the deadline, it's 10% off each day, but better to turn it in tomorrow or the next day than not at all. But what I did is I added some examples on here. Oops, wrong one. Let me just click on things randomly. If you click on modules, I added these 2 files up here at the top this morning. So they both gave me permission like late last night. And so I gave you 2 like samples and they're a little bit different. So if you take a look at them, again, they're like 2 to 3 pages. And what this person did, this one was on Phineas and Ferb. So for them, they had like bullets, right? So they divided it up into sections of like introduction, character, analysis, conclusion, and then their source, right? So theirs is completely bulleted, which is totally fine, right? But they have like, I'm going to give you an overview and here's kind of my main idea, and then the character and some traits, some ideas about like symptoms and things that they noticed in the paper, and then disorders that go with that, followed by like their conclusion and their source. So that was how one person did it. The other person, if I go back, not that dissimilar, but this one did Goodwill Hunting. You're talking about switching to your paper here. So they wrote a little bit more out. So for them, they put the sources and show at the top. Sorry, is that a little blurry? Or is it just me? But up at the top, they put their source, the APA style source, which doesn't have to be in any kind of formatting yet, but they did the DSM and then their show. They wrote their summary, which is a couple of paragraphs. So they have that done. And then they wrote their character profile, and then they just have some thoughts bulleted after that on the disorder. So again, more than like the specifics of what you put in there, I just want to see that progress. So it could be that you wrote out a paragraph or it's all bullets. It's totally up to you. But I did put both of those on there so that you could kind of see how a couple of people did it. The instructions and everything are on here as well for the assignment. So 40 points. And then are there any other questions about the paper for now? Yeah. Just one. So in order to really get into depth, you just want to do one, right? You could think about, you can like do like a paragraph mentioning other people if you want, but focus just on one. Otherwise it gets too long. Anything else about the paper for now? Again, no like formatting necessarily, but that source, so just say one more time, the source is the first thing I'm going to look for, right? 10 points. So please make sure academic source, like a journal article, the DSM, every single one of you could use, not the textbook. You can use the textbook, but something beyond the book. Okay, the other thing is that we do have our second exam on Monday. So we have finished unit 2, exam number 2 right here under quizzes. So it'll open up Monday morning at 12:01 a.m. and close Monday night at 11:59 p.m. So I'm giving you our time, but if you would rather sleep in and take it later, that's totally fine. There's a study guide, of course. If you click on modules, it's right here, study guide number 2. And again, it's not cumulative at all. It's just on this unit. So you can see here are all the terms from chapter 8, 6, 7, 9, and 10 in order that we covered them. So make sure that you know all of the terms on here. If it's on here, it'll be on the text. If it's not on here, you don't need to worry about it. If it were me, as I mentioned last time, I would type this out or write it out and have it in front of me. You can use your notes and book, but just like last time, you'll run out of time if you're trying to look everything up. So make sure you've studied and prepared, but it's very straightforward, just like the last one. And a lot of you did fantastic on the first exam. So if you did, do the same thing. If you wish you had done better, maybe spend a little more time on this time. But I won't see you Monday. I will be grading these throughout the day as you turn them in, but you'll get a score instantly for everything but the short answer. Okay, so that'll be on Monday. And then when I see you after that, we'll start on our next topic, which is schizophrenia, which came up a little bit today. Really like interesting one. That's chapter 12. There's schizophrenia and personality disorders. We still some really like interesting good ones to get to in our last third. And I see you next week for Halloween. I'll bring candy on Wednesday, right, for all of you. But if you have any questions, I'll hang out for a few minutes. Otherwise, I'll make sure you turn that in as you go, and I'll see you next week.
So I just rewatched the like thing again, it's in character notes.
Okay, great.
Is that enough for her, or should I still type out like a